understood how MVC is implemented in case of freestyle applications. Now the question comes, what all different, overall the big picture of Fiori, how exactly we have lots of other areas as such. And in this specific topic, we'll understand how to consume. Already SAP has shipped around, already understood that there are 12,000 apps in the SAP Fiori ecosystem for across various modules. So we'll understand how do we configure or manage those apps. And similarly, likewise, custom UFI apps, if at all we are building anything, so how do we deploy onto the cloud as well as how do we deploy onto the on-premise, etc. ecosystem. So all the authorization related, and how do we do client specific customization, etc. So these topics we are going to discuss in coming days as such. So to give a simple glance, so this is how the big picture can be um, better explained. So as per the whole environment, now if you could see, these are this we can call it as three-tier architecture as such, where the architecture diagram which I discussed earlier. So this is put in a different perspective. So on the top layer we have the browser in most of the cases where we access all our applications, etc. So how do we have those better design, etc. So we understood several ways. One is using design guidelines. So design guidelines allows us to um, build Fiori, like all the Fiori apps, how 12,000 apps, all the apps are having same look as well, and the same approach. So if you see any apps, all the icons generally either action buttons you will find on the footer, and some of the applications if you see they'll be consistent. You'll not find any difference in the way you are accessing any of the apps. So for all this purpose they are try to put some design guidelines, Fiori design guidelines, and because of that we feel all the applications are on that they call it as Fiori design system. So when we say design system, so consistently all the apps, they ensure that they have similar look and feel when they're accessing it. So specific to like three tracks of development, we can classify them. One is a web development where we use on the browser. Another is native development. That means specific to iOS. If you're using mobile, MDKs, so mobile development libraries if you use, and if we follow the track, the building template process, everything same. Only thing is the libraries which we choose, there the key difference would be there. And we have something called Cordova. So using Cordova, we deploy to the native landscape. So that is only the deployment area where certain changes would be coming into picture in case of native device. There is a new track, like I said, Copilot. Copilot, it's all about digital assistant like Cortana, how we have etc. So similar kind of cab builds, etc. They're trying to put, but right now it is a chatbot which has some how do we say? So it's like they are calling us all the AI and machine learning capabilities. So if you are using some frequently transactions, etc., and if you suppose in the chatbot you ask for status of the order ID or some purchase order if you have, and you say status of the order ID, then automatically it directly checks the particular service. Instead of going into the application, we can straight away get the results and we can directly take action of approving, etc. as well. So these all are part of the newest offerings. So this is part of Copilot. So for that we have a separate track called conversational UX. So our area would be mostly confined to web as such, because here there is no development space. All what our SAP ships, only those we can consume. Right now SAP hasn't given any API to allow for developers to work on conversational AI. So here whatever features SAP provides, only we are limited, or we are currently we'll be just consuming those applications. So what does it mean is, not all 12,000 apps support Copilot as on date. Only certain few applications as on date. SAP has mentioned that it has Copilot features, etc. And only those applications will be able to see those features. Same is the case for native mobile as well. So native mobile app, not all apps are, we have as native mobile apps. So certain use cases are covered as part of native mobile app. But it doesn't mean that we cannot access on mobile. So the traditional approach we have to use, but they are not specific to. So when we do go for web, when we go for native, when we go for AI, so I mean the Copilot one. So the clear distinction is they're like approval scenarios. It makes sense to approve in a single shot. So it will be ideal. And when you have something called QR scanner or some barcode scanning, etc. where you cannot do it with a laptop, right? So the use case demands to have a some to use. If you want to use a mobile camera, or you want to use some uh, like you want to contact directly a supplier, etc. So it good to have a native feature. So certain use cases which can use or leverage native device features, then we go for this MDK style of SAP MDK approach of development. So this is in short. So like the backend, this is a front end layer as such. The backend, we know, like we have lots of SAP products. We need to understand here two parts. So we just do not have just the S4 HANA product, which is a flagship ERP product, but we have other cloud areas which SAP has acquired. So for us, the data, see, when we say the Fiori apps can consume data from any of the SAP ecosystem. In this case, SAP S4 HANA is just one backend. If you hear C4 HANA is, for the CRM area, Fieldglass, SuccessFactors, Ariba, Concur, these all are cloud products meant for various channels. So this is for B2C and B2B channel, and this is for HR related area. And Fieldglass also similarly for, I think it's mainly meant for in the area of, I think this payroll management, etc. Also, some of the parts are covered in Fieldglass, but extensively, I'm even not very much comfort. I mean, haven't worked on this particular area, but you have Fieldglass as a cloud product as well. Concur is meant for travel management, and likewise, now new age offerings of more of cloud products, and existing ERP product, existing customers, etc. would be very soon will be migrated or will be moving to S4 HANA in the coming years as such. So now we understood that we have new platforms which are providing data on a day-to-day basis. So how do we manage or deploy applications for each of these ecosystems, and how do you manage to deploy to S4 HANA system? So these all are the areas where we'll try to touch base upon in this week. So we know now already for the web, SAP UFI is a framework which we are using it. And as part of Fiori 3, we have the newer approach called UFI Web Components. So if you're using AngularJS or you're using React.js or anything, so SAP started shipping new controls which you can use in combination with both UFI controls we can use, as well as for the using web components we can use all the AngularJS controls as well. So that's how the UFI Web Components helps us. At the same time, we know HTML and CSS are behind the scenes. They play the important role. Whenever we require some certain CSS elements, custom one you want to write, the recommended approach is using theme designer. In the theme designer, we have we have an option to add custom CSS code as well. There are like lakhs of, not lakhs, so there are thousands of CSS standard CSS classes SAP ships. We can straight away use those CSS classes, or we can modify the CSS using theme designer tool. And alongside, important thing to understand is not all transactions today are available in Fiori platform. When I say this, there will be less frequently used, there will be more frequently used. So the gap for even for customers as well is today customers are using some some frequently they're using suppose around 500 to 600 transactions for their whole of the scenarios. So if the customer asks us, sir, we want what all SAP Fiori areas we can what is the recommended Fiori apps for all the scenarios. So we should be able to answer the question. So how do we answer it? So they're like, what's the alternative approach as well? So one approach is we have something called a recommendation report. I'll just show in a minute. So the deployment we call have something called so this is Fiori apps recommendation report. So this is a free approach which SAP provides, by which we can understand which are the best what all Fiori apps currently you're using, and what are the T codes you're using currently, and which all Fiori apps can simplify your oral process. So for this purpose, there is one T code as such to get this particular list. So if customer is on ERP, or if customer is using any existing all T codes as such. So what are the alternative Fiori apps we have, and certain use cases which do not fall into it, we can ask them, or we can ask users to use T codes as styles within the launchpad as well. So there are like three kinds of users. So now new customer who is trying to add value to their existing ERP system. If they are on ERP or if they are on S4 HANA, if they wanted to start using Fiori apps. So basic check is you have to check which current version they are on ERP. And if they are on S4 HANA, you have to understand which S4 HANA product, because in S4 HANA as well, 1909 release or 2020 edition release or which release they are on, we need to understand. And then comes we have the simple approach which they break down. So this is free. You can go to just sap.com/FAR, and frequently used T codes etc. Further to extract, we have some T code called ST03N. So by going to ST03N, so this is how the this sample as such. So from this T code, we can extract all the report consisting of what currently all the frequently used. So in the production system, is the customer landscape. If we are based on the system where we go, if you go here, we'll get a complete report this way. So this shows you a list of which all T codes are being used based on month wise, based on year. If you want to see from last 6 months, actually which all T codes are being used. So for end users, which all T codes etc. they're using, will come to know in a simple report. What we have to do is after going to this particular recommendation report, you can just select get started, and you can just provide some details of your customer and what all details. And SAP would be, just you have to upload that particular file, and SAP would be suggesting us sending us the report. It's anybody can request for this one, and they'll share us a complete detailed. See, this is how the sheet would be there, and then you will have a simple criteria of which all applications. Now this is how the list could look, where these are the transaction name and what all how many currently steps you are taking. Like in this transaction, how many steps, like maybe you are going to multiple T codes in between, or you are processing etc. So overall how much time etc. it is taking etc. Some metrics they are trying to do, and they'll suggest us like this much of time saving or cost saving etc. would be achieved by implementing some of the use cases in Fiori etc. So this is one good way to show customer that this is what value add we can add by start leveraging the existing SAP Fiori. Because there's no additional cost as such for you. All you have to do is you have to suggest your customer that this gives you some additional benefit, and how do that? So these metrics will tell you. So this is from the transaction once you get. So here's a clear shot as such. So they'll. I think this is not screenshot out there, but they generally figure out and they'll just show us like in finance these many apps are recommended. So like this is how you'll get that report, where you have 126 apps, recommended apps we have for your current use cases, and under each area they classify. In manufacturing area or in procurement area, where those all apps fall as such. So you'll get a clear shot, and if customer is specific to certain areas, we can just show them that these are some of the cases where they can better utilize. So this is simple way of understanding which all scenarios they can achieve. So this is the first step of understanding how the recommended approaches we can suggest for customer. Okay, so first step is suggest recommended apps. How do you do using this FAR? So it's like just sap.com/ you can just type /FAR and you'll get Fiori recommended applications etc. So this is how the Fiori apps recommendation report they call it is. So we get it. So clear. So the point to remember here is the transaction as such. So in our case, the transaction to use this is ST03N. Okay, right. So I'm just moving on to our. So now we have a question of two things. Okay, we suggested that we are having, we said in the beginning of it, like we are having 500 to 600 T codes, but whereas we are suggesting something called in the 1/4 of it, like just 100 or anything. So what would be the typical case? Like how exactly we have to go forward from here? See, from this understanding, we can know that certain use cases can be leveraged with Fiori, and customer will come back. Okay, it's good. So we are able to leverage existing Fiori landscape and ecosystem. We're able to start consuming at least a couple of it. But they will face two challenges. One, the existing standard Fiori apps may not be able to directly usable for the customer because they do not have all the necessary task currently. How whatever they're doing, the transaction existing code transaction, maybe certain fields might be missing, maybe certain process might not be they have customized in their existing on-premise environment, and they want similar customization to be added to standard Fiori apps as well. So those cases we have something called extensibility concept. So all the standard Fiori apps can be extended, and SAP gives a clear metric like to what extent we can extend and what are the limitations of it. So even that's applicable both for Fiori as well as the OData part. So both areas they give us some recommendations to what extent we can extend and what we can modify. So that we'll talk about also in coming section. So then for what are classic UIs we have, there is a separate approach. Either if those scenarios does not exist, as is those T codes, if we have a web info for HTML, so URL based approach we have, then we can integrate those web UIs directly. And currently we have something called visual harmonization, using which SAP what it has done is you have similar look and feel for the T codes as well. Like they try to give the earlier Belize theme. Now when Quads theme, I think they started shipping it. I'm not sure for the GUI whether we have a theme for Quads, etc. The latest theme for the Fiori 3 was Quads as such. So what SAP tries to do is all the GUI T codes also they're trying to give the same theming option so that customer has similar or close to near similar experience of using Fiori apps or GUIT codes. So from customer point of view, they were trying to keep the the similar look and feel. So for that purpose, we can directly integrate some of the T codes. Now, if we have 100 T codes which are Fiori apps, next 400 we can straight away recommend the classic UIs. We can directly use it. There is one more option called screen personas. So for specific to classic UI, if we are having 20-30 fields and we do not have a Fiori app, then using screen personas, what we can do is we can simplify the existing T codes. So T codes we are using drag and drop approach. We can adjust how the UI should look, etc. And if we are not using certain fields, so in the T code, all the fields will be visible. If you do not want to, you want to hide certain fields, and out of 30 fields, only 15 fields user are entering, and you do not want them to see these particular fields, then you can mask those fields and you can simplify the T code as well. So for that purpose, we can use screen personas. So that is a to retrofit or to make the old T codes look more better and more easy to access. So we can use this particular approach to transform certain use cases in SAP classic UI screens also we can use. And rest we know Fiori elements, Fiori tools, Business Hub Studio, these are meant for building new and custom solutions. Now we have customer asks, sir, this T code, we badly need it and we want to simplify this. Then that use case we can pick it up. And there comes the new work for us as a developers to build some custom solutions. So now after understanding this will have a gap. So okay, certain T codes we immediately to have value, we have to use as T codes, certain we have to use as Fiori apps. Certain use cases we have to start building our custom UF apps. There comes the actual picture of designing and trying to have full control to the customer. So customer starts, we are asking them. So then we try to understand what use cases to build. There upon we can start taking up new use cases and we can start building it. There are like different approaches. If you follow Fiori elements approach, you can develop an app in less than a 3 to 4 days, matter of 3 to 4 days. If you're using a freestyle approach, app can be built from 5 days to ranging from to some 60 days. So ideally all the applications, no matter in Fiori, and the development time is relatively very less. So max 3 months, any application, if you break down the problem statement into, so generally how they do is, if you have a huge problem, they split into 2 different applications. So how do we do that is, if your intended task is just to create a sales order and not approving it. So you have both tasks, creating sales order and approving a sales order. Then we split that into 2 parts as apps, 2 apps. One app focuses on creating a sales order, another app focusing on approving the sales order. So you're bifurcating into 2 areas so that most frequently used are maybe your BPO guy or someone who might be using to create a sales order, whereas your manager might be approving a record, because there are like two different people. So you can give two flavors so that section of people can start leveraging the functionalities of the application, and you can better control the role as well. So certain information you can provide only for the manager, and certain information you can provide only to the uh, PPO guy. So in that way, in Fiori, all use cases are break down into smaller use cases, and then we start building the applications. So relatively, now instead of two apps building at the same time, you can give the first application in 15 days and then the next application in the 15 days. So in agile way, we can start delivering new scenarios, etc. Fine. So that's the big picture. And what topics we cover is, this is part of Fiori administration. We cover deployment, configuration, and then authorization handling and client specification. So these are the topics now we are going to see. Right. So from the picture, we understood that deployment and configuring are different when it comes to on-premise and cloud. And it's different again from Fiori apps and SAP apps. So Fiori apps, we need not do anything. I mean, we need not do anything in the sense of certain sections will be removed, because we need not to manage everything. Everything is managed by SAP, and we just need to follow the instructions what SAP suggests. And if you follow those instructions, we can pretty much have quick access to all the Fiori apps. So we'll understand how to get Fiori installed, existing Fiori apps installed on-premise as well as on cloud. And similarly for the SAP track, we'll try to see all custom applications if you're building it. How do you deploy to the cloud and how do you deploy to the on-premise? So these are the topics we'll touch upon. So, right. Now, be it on-premise or cloud, for the end user, the entry point will be always the Fiori Launchpad. Okay. So he has no difference. So whether your whole ecosystem is running on-premise or anything. So for entry point will be the same. So we'll have always a Fiori Launchpad. And we have two tracks as such. For the on-premise, we call it, we should have, it's a recommended approach to have a dedicated front-end server, which will host only Fiori apps. It doesn't have any database linked to it, and it has only the Fiori apps as such. And we have something called gateway server. So this we call it as NetWeaver ABAP stack. So in the ABAP NetWeaver stack, we generally have the Fiori apps deployed. And on the other hand, on the cloud, we have something called Launchpad service. Previously, we used to have Portal service. Now they have rebranded as Launchpad service. So there is a difference between Portal service and Launchpad service. I'll talk about in later. But specific to in the cloud, if you have to deploy, you have to use Launchpad service to deploy your custom UFI apps or anything, or your standard Fiori apps as well. In this platform, they call it as, now they have renamed to Business Technology Platform recently. And certain changes are happening very rapidly in that space. And whatever content I discuss, I'll try to bridge the gap, and all the time certain things can change in this particular area. But in this case, nothing changes. It has been the same from beginning of last 5-6 years. But this area, Business Technology Platform, they are changing or rebranding certain ways of doing it. Everything got changed from 3 months back. Whatever deployment options etc. used to exist, everything got changed. In 2021, Business Technology Platform has evolved, and they have modified many things. So I'll just try to show which are the changes currently are active, and which are relevant for Business Technology Platform. It's nothing but it's a platform as a service where we can deploy or manage and build our applications. So SAP provides all the tools on the go, and if you have a subscription, we can just if you have a right subscription, we can have all the access to all the services. We can just straight away consume. Here we have lots of legwork. When they say legwork, we have to have lots of delay. See, here the typical time to launch and enroll etc. will be hardly in a day's work. Everything will be set up. But in the front-end server, it takes at least a week time to set up the things and streamline the process. So that gap would be there always for on-premise and cloud. So we'll just see how they differ. So first I'll talk about Fiori apps deployment and configuration in the on-premise. Then I'll talk about the cloud one. And first I break down into 3 simple ways. So there are like very complex is involved in deploying Fiori apps, but I'll have breakdown into a very simple way. First thing, we already know we have a standard Play Store, like Android Play Store. We have for SAP, this is called Fiori Apps Library as a Play Store, where Fiori Apps Library, you can Google it out and you'll come to this particular page. This is an entry point to understand what all Fiori apps we have. If you type as SAP Fiori Apps Library, you might be already familiar with it. Fiori Apps Library. So this is like a play store. Whenever any customer asks for any requirement, whether we have a Fiori use case or not, this is the place we have to come and we have to check. Be it any landscape, they are using cloud products or they are using on-premise product, any product, just come to Fiori Apps Library and just check if any solution specific to your module or specific to your role. So if you are a administrator or you are anything, so you can filter out specific apps meant for each of the use cases. So this is the Play Store for our SAP you can consider. So the app recommendation which I mentioned, you can straight away access from here as well. This is a FAR, it will redirect you to. And one important thing to understand here is we have different products in SAP ecosystem. First and foremost thing which you have to do is, if you have access to SAP system, specifically front-end system, go and check which product they are on. So it's very important to understand. So if they are on S4HANA, we have something called a specific offering called Lighthouse apps. What are Lighthouse apps and how they are different from existing apps? So if you see S4HANA capabilities, like how we have one simple example I'll tell you. So Fiori apps are classified into three areas, like transactional factors and analytical apps, from the way we can generate. So what's the difference in this is, so there is one more way to show. Let me show you some pictorially. So the architecture, if you're able to see the architecture, so if you can see the screen, so this is how the landscape could be. So if your client, you're or a developer, so whoever maybe, so this is how we have the overall look. So if you see the S4HANA product could be on-premise. When you say on-premise, SAP data center, everything resides within the client's premises, and they manage the complete apps. Whereas in S4HANA Cloud, this product is relatively new, and even for many customers, transition from ERP to S4HANA itself is a big challenging task, and even that is itself is new. And for customers who are already on S4HANA, S4HANA Cloud offering is another offering where this is not very stable product as per what our client interaction I had. So I'm not sure how many people are adopting, but S4HANA Cloud is also an offering which SAP provides. So this is the one where you could have exclusive certain features could be very early release, etc. You'll get first for S4HANA Cloud, then they'll gradually you'll get for onto the S4HANA on-premise. So this is how the flow would be there. And if you see this whole part, the Fiori apps and OData services are all managed by SAP itself. So you need not to do any work. So if you have an active subscription, SAP Fiori Cloud, they call it is. So directly you do not have any front-end server. All the apps, ecosystem, everything are deployed onto the business technology platform. And if you have an active subscription, you can straight away consume all the apps on the cloud. So you need not to do any work at all. So everything is managed by SAP itself. But whereas the S4HANA on-premise as well, we have to do certain activities. So like we should have a three-tier architecture where we should have a dedicated front-end server which will host Fiori apps as well as OData services. And on the other hand, we have the backend server. This is we call it as front-end server. And then the backend server, we should have certain components. We'll see which components we need, and that we call it as the actual S4HANA product. So the business suite, which is connected to the HANA database. Technically, both are S4HANA systems, but they're like two different servers. One server will have only front-end components and gateway components, and the other will have the backend logic or the backend data, all the business data, be it any module. So this is about S4HANA. You are on S4HANA or you are on old ERP business suite, etc. It doesn't matter. So in both cases, we follow this. We call it a central hub architecture. If we are using a single system to manage Fiori apps, etc., then we call it as embedded hub. But that's not very actively used in customer scenarios. Customers, all large customers or at least medium scale customers, generally go with this dual architecture where you have dedicated front-end server and we have a dedicated backend server. So you generally embedded hub is nowhere used unless for the POC purpose, or if you see the ESP system, that is an embedded hub. So the one which we use for exercises. So this is an ESP system, and if you see this launchpad, so it's a login, right? You are able to see. So you can register for this free one. Mukesh, so I think you are not familiar with this. I have discussed earlier to how to get access to it. So ES5 we have, I'll just share the URL so you can use it. So all the apps here are hosted on ES5, are in embedded hub. And similarly, we have something called OData service as well. So in the accesses, usually we use the ES5 demo services. So if you see, you're able to access the OData service here using ESV system. At the same time, you're able to access Fiori apps as well. That means both are hosted on the same single SAP server. So that single server is S/4HANA itself, but if we are deploying both the things on a single, then we call it as embedded hub. Whereas if you have a dedicated Fiori box and you're connecting both of the systems, using trusted RFCs, etc., then that we call it as a center. So how it differs with developers? For the developers, if you see, if you're developing applications, we have two tracks. We can build on-premise or we can build on cloud platform. Okay, this you can consider as business technology platform. This document is not yet updated, and instead of WebID we use business technology platform. So sorry, BAS. So business application studio we use for building applications. In the on-premise also, we can earlier it used to be we used to have ADT plugins, so using which we used to deploy onto on-premise, etc. But here we have for deployment from directly from BAS we can do. We have the required tools, etc. to deploy. For custom apps, etc., we use business technology platform inbuilt tools to deploy directly onto cloud or on-premise. So this is simplified now. These both cases are simplified into single use case now. So clear like how the apps are managed in case of cloud or on-premise. So this is a high-level view. For the developers, this is how it looks, and for customers, this is how the landscape, their internal landscape could look. Now the Lighthouse apps, when I specifically was talking about, new features are available in analytical space. So transactional apps, we recommend transactional apps for all ERP customers. So ERP, if they are on a business suite, they can use all the transactional apps and fact sheet apps. Does not have any dependency of database. So most of the ERP database run on Oracle DB, and you pretty much you can use it. Whereas all the scenarios for facing on analytical apps, then HANA database is mandatory, and SAP ships analytical apps only on HANA database. And what the reason is, we do not go through this layer. So we have a different architecture. I'll just show in a minute. So analytical apps only runs on only HANA database. So it's mandatory to have HANA DB for analytical app scenario because it uses in-memory computing. And I'll just show you a simple architecture of so help.sap.com, we have good overview. Yeah, this one. So anything on help.sap, try to check newest areas as well. So for the transactional app, this is how the architecture looks. So this is your front-end server, and this is your backend server, and it is connected to HANA database or any database. So the transactional apps, there is no mandatory thing that you have to use HANA database or anything. So here in this case, you can be on HANA or you can be on any database. Whereas for the fact sheets, if you see, it is the same. So front end and back end you have, and it's connected to HANA database. So we have something called for the fact sheets, we something called search. So if you see the global search, so this we call it as global search. So for the fact sheet, generally they have some customer phone number, etc. You want to search, or you have a purchase order, etc. You can directly search from here. When you search from here, it goes and reads across applications. So you are on suppose if I say some uh, products, etc. In this case, it will directly take you to that particular application. Or if you are adding any, if you internally, if you have any product number, in this case, let me take if I have any valid scenario. So you are able to follow, right? So what we're trying to say is um, different type of apps, what are the requirements as well. So if customer is having, if it is not, it's on ERP product, we cannot suggest them analytical apps. We can suggest them only transaction fact sheet apps. And why is it is because it has a dependence of HANA database. And likewise, when customer needs badly analytical application, then our recommendation would be to, they should be on minimum on HANA database. If they are running ERP product, they have HANA database. They need not be an S4 HANA, but they need an HANA database. So that's what minimum criteria we are talking about. So in this case, I have this product ID. Let me I think here they haven't not implemented. So we have something called search models. What search models do is, so if you have some key fields within the application, like in this case purchase order, if it's a key field, etc. So without actually going inside the application, we can search using the search models straight away on the global search itself. Okay, how it does is, it doesn't actually go into the application. It directly checks in the database. So for that purpose, what we do is straight away from, it doesn't go through all this layers, and it directly hits the backend server, and it tries to read the data. That's the results will be very fast and instant. So for to achieve the search, I think they haven't implemented the search model. So it means this is a dummy applications. So applications which have like approve purchase or any other scenario where you can uniquely identify that particular record, etc. Then those all are shipped as part of search models. Search models allow us to dig deep directly from the main search. I think most of the people even don't realize that they can use this particular thing, and they don't use this global search at all. But there's a quick way to directly access that back of the data. As this more, if you're able to see, where all the apps they come through this channel. So you click on a tile, that means you're actually hitting the front end server. And then from the front end server, you have an OData channel. Using the OData channel, we are actually reading all the data. So all the roles, etc., kicks in here. Whereas here, when the search model directly, whatever the request or anything keyword you type in, it directly goes and hits the backend. So backend server, and it directly reads the data, and it shows you the data. Okay. So this is how the fact sheets architecture looks. And for the analytical app scenario, slightly the difference is you're running on see native HANA development. If you call it as native HANA development, like HANA specific cabinets, if you want to leverage like core scenarios where on HANA you can achieve real-time comparisons and analytics, etc. So for HANA, like it allows us to do lots of cabinets in analytical space. So in this case, instead of Fiori apps, all the analytic apps, they don't go through the Fiori server and then go to the backend server. Here also directly they hit the HANA. And here in the secure channel, what they do is they have something called, if you're creating any CDS or anything also, directly it will go there, and it will directly hit there, and it will just try to process. We have separate ways of designing apps exclusively for analytical scenarios, and those all are part of this approach. So that's the reason, because traditional way what happens is the database, etc., records, etc., will not be very instant. Okay, for the analytical scenario, you will compare lots of parameters to derive that particular chart or anything. So to derive that particular insights in real time, so any fraction of data got changed, immediately the tickers will change on the analytical app. Whereas here it is in a transactional way. You send a request, then it gets updated in the database. You update a record, you delete a record, then it updates. Whereas in the analytical space, you have a chart which uses lakhs of data points. You could have lakhs of records, and instantly it has to bring you the results of comparisons, etc. If anything got changed, suppose live IRTC ticket booking, etc., is there, where number of tickets will be sold out in less than a minute or something, some certain times. So those all are live cab builds, etc. scenarios. You can assume it. You can have a dashboard which shows how many tickets are currently available and how many are down, etc. So those kind of analytical benchmarks, etc. cases, HANA can be leveraged. So this is how the architecture differs in terms of each of the applications. So if customer is on ERP product, make sure they are running on HANA database or not. Then if they are not running, first check is done that you can recommend them only transaction and fact sheet apps and not analytical apps. If customer is on S4 HANA, or if they are on net, so here also if they are on any version, so they could be on 1809, 1709, 1709, or anything, any release. So no matter what release, so for them all apps are supported. One more difference for see, if you're running on here, it by default it comes with HANA database. There is no option of Oracle database in S4 HANA. So SAP ships default. So here the difference for customer who is running on analytical apps on HANA database and running on S4 HANA is Lighthouse apps. So Lighthouse apps are designed exclusive for S4 HANA product. For S4 HANA product. So core, they leverage S4 HANA core capabilities and certain use cases, not all apps, there are only few apps, and they, what SAP calls them as guided approach, where they say if you can, how you can improve the overall process. Maybe the how you are doing that approach, they are redesigned it the way of using that particular transactions or using that particular workflow. So you might be using in a traditional approach. In Lighthouse, they use the capabilities of S4 HANA. They try to bring a new approach to it. So for that, they say something called Lighthouse are like their flagship offering in Fiori space for S4 HANA exclusive users. So you can consider as some differentiated apps. So if you see, there is a separate category as SAP Fiori Lighthouse apps. Nothing but they are meant for S4 HANA product users. They can leverage the cap. So here here there's a list here which they'll have updated scenarios. If any new apps are released, every quarter they have some criteria where they say these are the new updates, these are the new applications which they have built. So anything that's coming in the 2021 year, you can check out here. So this is a new offering as well, Lighthouse apps. And specific to this is how ERP product, if you want to see only the products which are running on ERP product, then this is a SAP Business Suite you have to check. So if you check here, all the apps which are supported in transactional fact sheet apps specific to ERP customers, any product, CRM, HR, any module, PLM, etc. You just go here. If your customer is running on S4HANA, just go here. If customer wants to have some applications in the cloud space, it could be Ariba product, it could be SuccessFactors, it could be any cloud product, or it could be S4HANA cloud. This is the track you have to check. Now you understood, what all apps categories SAP Fiori can fall into. SAP Fiori technology can be used to build applications for any platform. It is not specific to module, it's not specific to anything. So if you have a skill set, then you can build application and you can deploy for any of these use cases. So that's the advantage. So I'll go to all apps and just I'll take one example and we'll see how we deploy the application. Clear so far, or any questions till this point? Okay, I assume all good. Okay, and let me just, okay. So I'm just logging on to ESY system. So now whatever we have talked about, let's see in reality how exactly we have to look into it. Now first and foremost, when you come log into this is the front end server. So if you're typically you have when you're in a client space, so you just need to have to access to both the systems. So you need to ensure that what you have to ensure is you need to have access to the front end server, FES. So once you have access to the front end server and then the backend server, so BES we call it as, so backend server. When you have access to both the systems, that means we are good to configure, or we are good to check whether which all apps are supported, etc. To the system. So we need these two access, only then we can do the rest of the steps which we are going to discuss. So go to front end server. In this case, for us both front end and back end are same. So I'm just logged on to ESY system. So this GUI version of and go to this menu and then in the system. So in the system you have something called status. So in the system you have to go to status. So this will take you to the section which will tell you the complete details of the server. So on what database is it running, what are the products installed on the system on the front end server, and what all are missing components, etc. So this is a place we'll understand. If you just scroll down below, it will tell you where environment. So this is of least importance for us. It's running on Windows NT. So here you'll on Linux landscape, or where we'll come to know, and this is where the database. So in this case now currently as Sybase is SAP acquired this particular products, all as Sybase products. So this is also like similar to Oracle, where transaction apps alone we can work on it. So the database currently running is it's Sybase database is running on it. And for us, for analytical apps to understand, we need analytical HANA database. So if here there is no HANA database, if you see an Oracle database, that means customer cannot access any of the analytical apps. So you can build analytical apps, but they are not they are not leveraging the HANA capabilities at all. So you might ask, there are charts in our application. Do we need HANA database? No. For charts or existing database also we can use, but fast performance you will not get. You cannot do complex analytical applications. Simple analytical applications can be built on any database. So there is no requirement for that. But I'm talking about some real-time analytics where globally, if people are accessing the database and they're making frequent changes, you wanted to see analytics from those data, then HANA database or analytical application deal with those scenarios. For those cases we need. So here, if the database is not HANA, then you can rule out the possibility. The second part is here it will tell you which product, etc. Then here you can go to product version. If you see here product version, so you can click on that search icon, then it will take you to something called two tabs will appear. What are the softwares installed on this particular server? Okay, so all SAP servers have NetWeaver stack. So that is like for the operating system, how we have Windows, etc. For the server, we have something called NetWeaver stack. So that stack would be ABAP or Java. So both the stacks for all our cases, on-premise cases, what we need is ABAP stack. So for the cloud apps, generally they go for Java stack. So NetWeaver Java stack. Now we have something called NetWeaver as ABAP stack. So if you're running on NetWeaver 7.51 and above, be it ERP or any product, you have all the UI and backend components. Just go back to one of my deck to just show this in the architecture point of view. Sorry. So stop me anywhere if we are not able to follow, or if I'm you know going fast or not missing out certain areas. So this screenshot you have to closely watch. Now what we are trying to understand is, so we have the front end server now. So we are into the front end server. Now, if your NetWeaver stack, see this server, it is running on NetWeaver stack, ABAP stack. So this also runs on NetWeaver stack. The backend also runs on ABAP stack, NetWeaver ABAP stack. So both are like, they are the allow you to install software products. So HR module you want to install, NetWeaver stack allows you to install a HR module. If you want to install PLM module, it allows you to. So the server is the same for the front end server and the backend server. Both are same. In the front end case, we do not link any database, whereas in the backend system, it is also S4HANA system. We link a database and we have all the uh, components as well installed. So prerequisite is whether you are having NetWeaver stack as 7.51 or not. If you're having 7.51, the components you are seeing like UI components, OData gateway components, these all components are by default available. If you have a version called 7.51 and above in ERP or S4HANA or any matter, so then you have both the components available straight away. If you do not have, you have to go to your basis. If they're running on very old stack of SAP ERP, then they have to manually install these components in order to start using standard Fiori apps or custom Fiori apps. This is a basic check. Okay, so this how we, this component itself I'm trying to show way to check in the system. So this is one where NetWeaver stack is ABAP. It says a 7.52. That means you are on you're on a good place. So you can have all the components installed. By default, they are installed also. And which product currently running? So the front end server has separate add-on called front end server. So this, if you see, we have latest component for S4HANA, FES for S4HANA 2020 edition. So this is the latest component which SAP released. So 2020 edition. So if you see here, if you check the description, SAP Fiori FES 2024 S4HANA. So one more place we need to check here. Now the question comes here is, suppose customer has asked you, sir, I want to leverage how to access latest Fiori apps. Like Fiori 3.0 apps I want to access. Fiori 3.0 apps. If I don't any Fiori 3.0 apps, how to access latest Fiori 3 apps. So can we install those? This is a question customer has asked you. So what should be your answer is, you have to go check here in the system whether you're having the latest FES server or not. FES add-on. So when I say FES server, so in the S4 HANA, the product should be, you should have the latest S4 HANA. Whether you want to build latest Fiori 3 capabilities or not, always S4 HANA FES product add-on. So currently, so what are FES versions would you have and what all we have? So I'll just show you a simpler report. Now we are running on 2020. So this translates indirectly to 1.87 SAP UFA framework. So how did I know this? I'll just show you in a minute. So S4 HANA 2020 session we are running, so we can leverage and use all the latest Fiori 3 etc. offerings. It is supported. But if you are somewhere, if your system is running on older stack, then definitely Fiori 3 add-ons etc. Options you will not have at all, because you need to, you have to ask your customer to, sir, upgrade to at least FES 2020 edition in order to start leveraging any Fiori 3.0 capabilities etc. So this is a simple check. I'll just show you one more metric here. So we have, I think, so we have something called stable release. So I'll just bookmark these URLs preference. So how do we understand that it is translated to 1.8 UFA framework, and how did we, what is the FES product add-on currently customer is on, where which one we have to suggest them to migrate. So we have to always suggest customer for longer, validity or longer long-term version. So how do we suggest customer for long-term version, etc. So this is where the place where I understand. So if you see here, this shows the real-time SAP UFA version status. There are like always two different offerings. If you see here the track, cloud only, and this is the NetWeaver stack. When they say 7.5, that these are nothing but your NetWeaver stack versions. So currently latest SAP UFA version is 1.88. Okay, it is under maintenance. And if you see, there are like certain end of maintenance section as well. So if you see, there's a long-term maintenance for 1.84 version, shows us 2023. And there's one more here. If you see 1.71, it says 1910. If you say S4 HANA 1910, that means it is running on 1.71. If they say they are running on, see, if you see, there are like many ways to look at this. This shows has a long-term maintenance 2027. So if customer is on FES, if you see 6.0, now currently we are on FES 2024 S4HANA. So this is a front-end server. On the front-end server, this is what you have noticed now. If you see here carefully, so FES 2024 S4HANA, in the product installed server, you found that SAP Fiori FES 2020. That means we are running on this particular area, FES 2024 S4HANA. So it translates to 1.84. So we can use the framework controls and features which are shipped until 1.84. This 1.84 is nothing but, if you type ufa.sap.com, when you land on the page, it will tell you which SAP UFI version you're running on. So all the new controls, anything which are launched until 1.84. So now we know that it's running on 1.84. So we should start building our applications by changing this to 1.84. So our server supports only till 1.84. So you have to start building application only till 1.84. So one important metric to understand here also is the this is like one is major release, this is 8.4 is minor release, and dot refers to bug fixes or patches. So after 1.84 is released, they have released some security patches. So so if you are certain controls or anything you faced issues, you suppose certain in the API it showed us, it last yesterday we have seen that text alignment, it was available from 1.71. Suppose there is a control which is available in 1.84 onwards and you started using it, and it had weird behavior, and you don't know where the security patches are, then you can check here to see if you have any latest patches here. So you see 1.849 is available. So after 8.4 is released, there are some patches available, 9 patches SAP is released. So you can check in 1.84 those issues are resolved. How do we check? So you can come here, and then you have something called here, I think. So we have about section. So in this about section, you can expand the version details, and they'll give you the detailed summary of change log. So which are now you used, maybe you might have used M library itself. So sap.m you can check. So within that sap.m there is, so within that .m, now what all change logs happened, you can check here the change log. I think here it says no changes are there in this particular version. So if any changes are there in that particular version, you'll come to know. Okay. So you can pinpoint and you can check if any bug fixes, etc. are resolved. This is one more approach. So clear. So we were able to understand, right? So now to understand, we can use only till 1.84. So set your version to 1.84, and you can start building your custom UFI applications or what are applications available as such. So this is one more way of identifying the component. I think today I'll stop this. We'll continue this tomorrow, but I'll just wrap up so far what we have tried to understand. So FAR URL also let me give. Can explore this section, and at this architecture also, if you want, you can have a glance at it. This gives you an overview of architecture. And then Fiori apps library we talked about. So Fiori apps library, we have something here. This is where we have Fiori apps and FAR report sap.com/FAR. You can go. Oh, let me. I think I have this URL. This. So this I'll be placed in GitHub. You can just check the any doubts also. Just to sum up, we have discussed one point. So if first we need to once we are in FES or anywhere, so we just go and check the system, and then if customer if we can ask customer to from ST03 and transaction, we can ask them to share the list of for the production system. We should not use the development system or anything, because for the production system we should ask them to share this particular report. Once you get that report, you yourself or when you can ask business to start uploading there, and SAP will give you a recommended approach. So what are the recommended apps? Then that's the starting point we understood. And then once we know that which are the recommended apps, we can suggest them two approaches. One, you can start using all the classic UIs and Fiori apps. You can start configuring it, and in the tomorrow's class we'll see how do we install etc. in detail. So we can start if the report suggests we understood that if up to there are like 600 T codes, out of which if SAP report says that 100 can be 100 Fiori use cases exist, in 100 apps we can start configuring it, and we can for the rest of the 400 or 500 we can in the launchpad directly we can integrate as classic. If you have classic UIs, we can use the T code directly integrate, or if you have web UIs, you can integrate web UIs also as tiles. So end user will access all the applications as single tiles, and they'll be able to have access to all the scenarios. So you're giving best offerings out of existing SAP ecosystem. So this is the first recommendation we have seen. Next, we understood that if customer is running on SAP ERP, so then we understood that transaction and fact sheets apps alone can be suggested, and we cannot they cannot leverage analytical apps because HANA database is something which is necessary. So this is the point we understood that customers cannot use analytical apps. So we understood one more point here, that for customers who are running on ERP and using HANA database, still they can miss out on, they cannot use Lighthouse scenarios. Okay, so this is SAP's way of convincing customers to move on to the latest product. If you say certain features are not feasible, because why this kind of scenarios they are putting a structure is previously for HANA database, when they introduced in order to force customers to migrate from Oracle to HANA, they started this kind of strategy. You can have analytical scenarios exclusive on HANA database, you miss out certain areas. So that's how they convinced. Now for ERP product, as the deadline is 2030 now, so still customers can continue using, they might be using HANA database, they may not be using, they can still continue till 2030. SAP officially supports, provides the support for all these landscapes. So you have mixed environments when we deploy. So you need to understand, for if customer is on this particular scenario, what all scenarios you have, you should not actually suggest customer. If you unnecessarily suggest a Lighthouse app, then it is not compatible at all. So you will be put in trouble. So you suggest them that this app exists, and you if you fail to understand that it is not compatible to them, then you will face a heat of trying to bridge the gap. So we have a scenario where exclusive to, if people are running on S4HANA, we understood that we can leverage something called Lighthouse app scenarios as well. And there are like some more machine learning based AI applications as well. There are like, I'll talk about those apps later, but it's not too early. There are very few use cases where in the TechEd 2020 recently also they introduced certain new applications, and even new track they have introduced something called SAP business services, AI business services, machine learning business services they introduced, and there are like some service ticket intelligence etc. Certain applications are there where they exclusively talk about machine learning capabilities within S/4HANA suite of products. So there are very few applications, not many. But SAP is trying to show that using machine learning, we can have smart apps. So far we used to call till Fiori 2.0 traditional apps, but we have something called intelligent ERP they're talking about, and they're talking about machine learning. If you use machine learning principles into Fiori apps, then we bring intelligence to Fiori apps. So that is in Fiori 3. Mostly they are trying to bring in machine learning AI kind of models as well, trying to use. It's not like you don't think that it will do everything for you. It's like Copilot also machine learning offering. It will try to simplify end user's job. You need not to struggle always to go inside and You need not to approve the report. You can use a chatbot to approve the report. So that's the objective of using machine learning principles. It's not about simplifying everything, but certain use cases, not all use cases, few use cases where it really can be implemented. SAP is providing machine learning offerings and capabilities. So these all new approaches are available in S4HANA product. So that's what we are trying to say, that old customers and new customers, this is the differentiation factor. And we also understood, like, if customer wants to access Fiori 3.0 capabilities, can they access or not? How do we check whether they are on the latest product or not? So FES 2020 is the latest product, and if they are on 2020 product, they can access all the framework. So in 2020 product, currently it is still 1.84. They can access. And how do we check? You go to available stable release, and you can suggest. If customer is on any of the old stack, you can just suggest them that, sir, so support if they are on FES 2020 itself. So if you have to build an application for current customer, we have to opt 1.71, not 1.84 also. Why, I will tell you. So if you build based on 1.71, all your apps, they're compatible till 2027. So if you're building an application, though it supports 1.84, your custom application. Now, if you start building it, this has maintenance only till 2023. If you know that this particular application is going to be used by customers for long term, and you want to expect that support, etc., to be available, then use the features available which are in the framework available till 1.71. Okay, if you use till 1.71, then you ensure that you have longer support. And if your customer is running on FES 6.0 or 5.0, etc., then if you see 5.0, if they're running on, which is the best one to go? If currently customer is on 5.0, that means their support is ending in this year 2021, so they're still running on 1.60. That means it's time, by mid of 2020 itself, they should start planning to migrate to the immediately available. So from 18.11, they have to migrate to 19.01. So 19.10, they have to migrate. So nothing but 1.71 they get, and it has a support till 2027. So if customer is running on this part, most of the customer might be in this particular stage. Okay, generally this was long back, it used to be there. Now it is coming to an end. Okay. So likewise, this is a new one, replaced for 1.60 1.84, which gives till 2023. Again, most of the customers will go to this, and this is how. So sometimes they release some support as well. So maybe they might release some more note, and they can say that this is further extended. That can also happen. It all depends on SAP's approach. So, but this is the place where you can find which version is supported till how long, right? So this is what we have discussed today. Tomorrow we'll try to see continuation of this, and then